Hello guys, welcome to this new episode. Welcome back to this channel and welcome to this episode. Today we are going to talk about Erich Fromm. Now, Fromm is a famous psychologist from the 60s, and somebody talked to me about Erich Fromm, and honestly I did not know anything about him. And so I went and looked him up, and then I happened to encounter this version, which is English Korean version of a book, which is called The Art of Loving. And so today we're going to talk about Erich Fromm. In this episode, which I can very simply call as Erich Fromm and the disease of the US, or the disease of the individualism that we witness every single day today in our modern society. But let us ask why. To answer this question, we have to take a step back. We have to go back to what is the definition of love according to Erich Fromm. And he states that love is the solution to all problems, to all the problems of existence. And the reason why is because, first of all, when we are born in a state of being separated, in a state of separatedness from the rest of the world. Now, of course, when we are first born, we are born in a state that we could easily define as a narcissistic phase. A narcissistic phase because we acknowledge the world as ourselves, and we do not see ourselves as being separated from the maternal breast, and so from the breast of our mothers. Yet again, there's a point of breakdown and break apart of this sense of being united with our mother's breast, and then from then on we go on and we move as separated individuals, me versus you, or me anyway separated from you. And this is so important because it makes us vulnerable, fragile, but also strong and autonomous for sure. But point being is that we are separated. Now, this is everything but exceptional, in the sense that it is very normal to cross stages and phases of being separated, and those phases and stages are called individuation, right? But everything that we do in this process of growing up as individuals is actually reconnecting to that kind of union that we first experimented. So this is somewhat the same kind of speech that the French philosopher Derrida made about Freud's book Beyond the Pleasure Principle, where he said that life chases death, right? And it does that because it wants to go back to the primitive origin of itself, right? And the same thing could be said about being separated and the relationship that separateness entertains with being united, and therefore union. So how do we reach the state of being united and therefore union according to Fromm? There are different ways. He says this in his book, right? There are different ways. The first is in primitive society orgies, right? And of course that's kind of a different sort of union, in the sense that it's very passionate, but it lasts very little, and it gives pleasure for a very temporary period of time. And then according to Fromm, in the ancient Roman society, we had union that was reached or it was attempted to be reached through the union of families, where you had a pater familias in Latin, which is the father of the family, who also has quite the power over the children and the spouse as well. Now here we have to mention that families still exist, whether that is composed of 2 members. Also nowadays we have 1 member families, but 2 members and more, so that still persists as a model of union. And then also another way in which union has been achieved is through equality and the full conformity with all that entails. And anyway, equality is seen by Erich Fromm as one of the more modern ways in which union has been obtained. And so there's that. And now equality has been achieved, at least some equality for sure has been achieved, and there's a lot to work on, right? But the truth is that besides equality and some conformity, there's also a different ironically, a different kind of movement nowadays that is more towards uniqueness, right? And so individuality in that sense. But let's get to the core of the issue, and the core would be represented by the concept of and the question of what is love. And in a sense, this is very interesting because here Fromm discerns different types of love, and the first it takes into consideration is the love of a mother, right? And the love of a mother is very different from the paternal love. Maternal love is welcoming, is nurturing. Maternal love is love for itself, right? It doesn't have an ulterior motive, and it does not have scope and purpose besides that of to nourish the life of the child. And so it is understanding, welcoming, and nurturing. In that sense, it is kind of absolute, right? Because it does not have any way in which it can be constrained. So this type of love, says Fromm, is way different from the paternal love. The love of a father is different in nature and by nature from the love of a mother, because the love of a father is more love for the child when he overcomes obstacles. So it is not absolute, it is constrained, and the rules, the fence that circumscribes this kind of love are the fences of what the child can overcome, what it is that he does or she does, and what it is that he or she can prove. And in that sense, so it's not welcoming per se, but it's more meritocratic. It's based on the virtue of what is the virtuous action, or the action that the father considers really virtuous. And therefore, paternal love is pretty much conditioned by what the child does and what it doesn't do. And in this sense, it's more subjected to leave it's more likely to leave a scar in our childhood, right? So being loved by a father is extremely important. I would say as much as being loved by one's own mother, but those two things, when they lack, when they're not present in a child's life, then they become seriously problematic. But the focus of today's show is not maternal or paternal love. The focus is love itself. And love preserves unity, maintains and preserves integrity of somebody else. Now, Fromm analyzes different types of love, and the first one is symbiotic love. So it's love that doesn't preserve the unity and integrity of each of its components, and the reason why is because they only survive through this process, process of symbiosis, right? And so this union, which is absolute, which is complete. And there's another form of love that Fromm here analyzes, and that is the concept of marketing personality. And Fromm says very interestingly that marketing personality means something very specific, and in this term, this video could be titled the C's of the US, and here the US taken as a point of reference for the another concept, which is the concept of individualism, right? And the idea behind the so-called marketing personality is the idea that you would be in a market choosing for the ideal partner, and everybody has to sell in themselves and look good for the other person, right? So it's not about their quality, their inner quality of being able to love and love deeply and being vulnerable, but it becomes more about you scratch my back and I scratch yours, and you could be my partner only if you have certain qualities. Now, regardless of whether or not those qualities are more superficial or more deep, it's important here to analyze that those qualities are qualities that do not underpin, do not support the faculty of love, because to choose somebody based upon the qualities that that person has means also that when we grow up, right, we could grow apart, we could actually grow apart, we can encounter that our partner, the one we chose once upon a time, is not able to respond to our needs. And in this sense, the concept of love, according to Erich Fromm, is completely different. It has nothing to do with me being able to satisfy your needs. It has more to do with me and you being capable and being able of loving each other and through each other the entire world. Now then, this type of love is then not love because it's transaction. It is a transaction on what I give you and what I receive back, right? And transactions, when it comes to love, are very delicate because, of course, right, then you have to consider that what you give is exactly what you have back, what the other person gives you in return, right? And that's delicate because how do you measure that? And also, is this really worth it? Meaning, can I really and deeply fall in love with somebody according to the transaction of what I receive that time and then what I receive the next time, etc., right? And can that person grow in a different direction, and therefore this meaning that I don't want to be with that person anymore, or that person doesn't understand me or doesn't support me as he used to, right? So all of that obviously conveys into this, right? And into the concept of selling love as it were another should say just marketing product. And so in these terms, in this transactional terms, love becomes something that I can return back, exactly like I do with the clothing that I buy online. And in this type of society, of course, divorce becomes contemplated and used. And be mindful here that I am not against divorce or separation, right? But and Fromm himself doesn't talk necessarily about divorce or separation, but he talks about the different kind of love that it has been created by this type of society, by this new types of individual. And so two types of love are also taken into consideration two more types of love are taken into consideration. One is that determines a sort of projection from the parent onto the child. And so, for instance, the parent advises the child to do this career because maybe he didn't finish or he didn't complete his studies, he dropped out of university or something similar to that, right? So in a certain sense, this kind of projection or this kind of like trying to imitate the parent steps, and the parent's career, right? That's very very common. It often happens that way. And there's also a different type of love that Fromm calls egotism à deux, which is realized when a couple unites in one individual, but it's conceived as one against the world, right? Interestingly, this conversation that Fromm has, right, in writing this book in his mind leads to another consequence, another consequence of what he's saying here, which is the fact that somebody can actually suffer at the end of a relationship, not only because of the loss, which would be normal, but also because of a different type of loss, which is caused by the delusion of what could have been realized and made concrete, and it didn't. And it didn't because that love stopped earlier than expected, right? And so there's a realistic delusion, if you like, that is that love has finished, and I cannot see that and meet and talk to that person, technically speaking. But there's also the realistic sort of delusion that is, I'm still fighting for this, after breakups. Sometimes people still fight for getting back together and getting something fixed, right? And we conceived it in terms of fixing something, right? When there's nothing really to fix, it's just that we want to go back to what potentially could have been, but at a certain point broke and couldn't be repaired. To love properly, then we would need care, we would need respect, we would need responsibility in a sense of commitment, of course, and eventually, and also basis of all of this is that we would need knowledge of that person, because we actually need to know that person to love that person through which or through whom we actually love the entire world. Yet, knowledge is not only subjective, as in concerning somebody else's life needs, a desire for attention and desire for needs, but knowledge is also objective, and in that sense, it is a measure against narcissism. Erich Fromm makes the example of a woman that calls the doctor and the doctor is too busy, cannot visit her, and the woman over the phone keeps saying something like, please, I live very close to you, etc., right? And so in that sense, that doesn't help freeing the doctor from his commitments. And I found this extremely interesting because, in this sense, it's not about necessarily only what I want and what I need. And there is a compromise, and Fromm never talks about compromise, but there is a constant compromise in a relationship that works, right? And this compromise, though, is more of a symphony, is more of a understanding and empathy that gets exercised, in a couple and in the dynamic. Or in the multiple dynamics of a couple, and it's not unilateral. I need this, therefore you're gonna provide me this, right? And that I found very interesting. And then Fromm closes with another definition of love. One at the beginning, love is the cure of all existential problems, and one at the end of the book. So at the end of the book, Fromm says that art is a faculty and is something that must be trained. It is somewhat similar to what some counselor might describe as the verb of actually doing, and it's more than that in the sense that it's exactly the opposite of what is conceived love to be nowadays in this society. And in that sense, it is not subtracting something to oneself, but doing in a way that enriches both the people involved, and so both the partners. And so that I found not only beautiful, but also potential cure for individualism and for the disease that is a disease of the US, but it's a disease that is extending, sprawling its branches also in Europe. With that being said, guys, that is it for this video. So I'll wait to read your comments, and I'll talk to you some more next time. Much love. See you next time. Bye bye.